They dubbed him the monarch, yet monarchs select their realms. Elvis Presley did not choose Las Vegas. He was delivered there, confined, and compelled to perform himself into oblivion within a hotel that treated him like a lucrative, coin-operated amusement. Pull the lever, tally the earnings, pull it again. By the conclusion of his tenure with the agreement, Elvis Presley had not produced a significant record in years, had not appeared in a film since 1969, had not embarked on global tours, and had not evolved. He simply stood on a stage in the desert, night after night, until he had nothing left to stand on. The king before Vegas. To comprehend what Las Vegas extracted from Elvis Presley, one must grasp who he was before Vegas claimed him. In the summer of 1956, Elvis was 21 years old and already the most formidable presence in American music. Not formidable in the manner of an armed individual, but formidable like an idea that cannot be unthought. He moved his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they filmed him from the waist up because the movement below the waist was too much for American television. He was selling records at a pace that outstripped RCA's production capacity. He was the inaugural rock and roll luminary in the truest sense, not merely a vocalist, but a force of nature that parents feared and teenagers idolized. And then came 1958. The army conscripted him. He spent 2 years stationed in West Germany. Upon his return in 1960, a subtle alteration had occurred. It was not his vocal timbre. That resonant, trembling instrument remained, transcending any single musical category. However, the prevailing sentiment had shifted. The Beatles had emerged, and the British invasion had fundamentally reshaped the landscape of popular music. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, determined that his protégé would transition into a film actor rather than contending for relevance on the music charts. From 1960 to 1969, Elvis starred in 31 films. These were not artistic endeavors or profound works, but rather musical comedies with flimsy narratives, beach settings, formulaic scripts, and soundtracks engineered for straightforward album sales. The titles themselves, such as Blue Hawaii, Fun in Acapulco, and Spin Out, hinted at their shallow content. These movies generated revenue while simultaneously diminishing Elvis's spirit. Elvis detested them. Individuals close to him recounted his embarrassment over the films, recalling how he would read a script, phone his friends, and exclaim, "How do they expect me to deliver these lines?" He yearned for acting roles, having demonstrated genuine aptitude in Jailhouse Rock and King Creole during the late 50s. He desired significant parts. Parker consistently refused. The established formula was profitable and kept the operation running. By 1968, the formula had ceased to be effective. The films were underperforming and the soundtracks were no longer charting. Elvis was 33 years old and, for the first time in his adult life, culturally marginalized. It was at this juncture that producer Steve Binder persuaded Parker to permit Elvis to participate in a television special. No scripts, no predetermined structure, just Elvis on a stage in a black leather suit, performing music with old companions, rekindling the essence of his past self. The 1968 comeback special aired in December of that year and was a resounding triumph. Critics who had dismissed Elvis as a Hollywood novelty watched in stunned silence. Here was the authentic artist, once again present and potent. Dangerous, captivating, the most charismatic performer alive. The special garnered the highest viewership ratings of any television program that year. Elvis had returned. The world was watching. The crucial question remained, what would Parker do with this resurgence? The Colonel proceeded as he always did, striking a bargain. The Colonel's pact with the devil, Tom Parker. Let us delve into the persona of Tom Parker. His actual name was Andreas Cornelius van Kuyk. He was born in Breda, the Netherlands, in 1909 and immigrated to America clandestinely in the late 1920s. He never attained citizenship and never returned to his homeland. The reason for his inability to revisit, and this is paramount, was his potential involvement in the demise of a young woman in the Netherlands. The records are ambiguous, and Parker himself never disclosed details of his past. What we do know is this: he lived his entire existence in America without legal immigration status and without a valid passport. Dwell on this singular fact. For all that Parker inflicted upon Elvis Presley during the final 2 decades of his life can be understood through the prism of this single secret. A man lacking a passport could not depart the country, and a manager unable to leave the nation could not oversee a client who undertook international tours. Consequently, Tom Parker ensured Elvis Presley never performed internationally. Consider the implications. The Beatles graced stages in Tokyo, London, Hamburg, and Sydney. The Rolling Stones forged a global empire by traversing the world. Elvis Presley, the progenitor, the artist from whom they all drew inspiration, never performed beyond the confines of North America. Not a single international engagement throughout his entire life. Parker consistently offered justifications, logistical challenges, financial constraints, unfavorable timing. However, the underlying reason was the passport. The fundamental impediment was that if Elvis traveled to London, the Colonel could not accompany him. And if the Colonel could not be present, Tom Parker would lose control over events unfolding there. Therefore, when the 1968 comeback special reacquainted the world with Elvis Presley's unparalleled talent, Tom Parker did not envision a global tour. He perceived a hotel engagement. The International Hotel in Las Vegas was slated to debut in the summer of 1969. At that time, it stood as the world's largest hotel, boasting 1,500 rooms, a performance venue accommodating 2,000 patrons, and a new ownership consortium eager to establish their establishment with a marquee act. Alex Hsu, the hotel's president, approached Parker. Parker, as always, saw dollar signs. The arrangement they solidified was as follows. Elvis would perform for 4 weeks during the summer of 1969, initiating with a run of 57 shows. The guaranteed payment for this inaugural engagement was $400,000, the highest sum ever disbursed to a single entertainer in the annals of Las Vegas history. Elvis assented, unaware of the true implications of his agreement. The specifics of the contract reveal what Parker successfully negotiated and what he overlooked. The financial compensation was substantial. $400,000 for the initial engagement was genuinely extraordinary in 1969, and the figures escalated subsequently. In the ensuing years, Elvis commanded upwards of $1 million per engagement, undertaking 2 such engagements annually. This represented considerable wealth, sufficient to make disputing the arrangement difficult. However, examine the terms underpinning the remuneration. Parker secured a 5-year contract, subsequently extended, which committed Elvis to 2 engagements per year at the International, later rebranded as the Hilton. Each engagement spanned 4 weeks and encompassed 57 performances, typically 2 per evening, a midnight show, and a late-night performance, with occasional single-show nights interspersed. The schedule was intentionally grueling. The hotel's objective was maximum output for maximum profit. Parker facilitated this as his commission, which by this stage had escalated to a staggering 50% of Elvis's gross earnings, increased with every performance. Let me reiterate, 50%. The majority of managers collect 10%, perhaps 15% if they are particularly industrious. Tom Parker was appropriating half of all Elvis's income. Furthermore, because Parker drafted the contract, he dictated its stipulations. The Hilton directly compensated Parker for specific aspects of the operation. Parker maintained his own suite at the hotel and pursued independent promotional ventures, including merchandise, programs, and photographs, from which Elvis derived no benefit. Equally detrimental was what the contract conspicuously omitted. There were no provisions allowing Elvis to pursue film projects during his engagement periods. The tightly packed schedule left virtually no time for recording between the two annual Vegas residencies. Parker filled the calendar with domestic tours, not the extensive arena tours that became the standard for rock artists in the 1970s, but rather one-night stands in arenas and auditoriums across the country, often booked at such unfavorable terms that promoters profited more than Elvis himself. Parker was scheduling concerts with the same approach he had employed for county fairs in the 1940s: high volume, minimal expense, and a complete absence of foresight. Crucially, there was no mention of Elvis's long-term artistic development. No clause mandated the recording of a minimum number of serious albums, nor any provision for film projects with reputable directors who had been expressing interest in Elvis for years. John Huston sought his involvement. Barbra Streisand wanted him as her co-star in A Star Is Born. Other esteemed filmmakers had reached out. Parker declined all of them. By 1972, Elvis Presley's professional existence had been reduced to a hotel contract, a touring itinerary, and a manager who had him completely ensnared. And the walls were steadily closing in. The premiere performance at the International Hotel occurred on July 31, 1969. It is imperative to understand the significance of that evening, as it represented a monumental occasion in American performance history. Elvis had dedicated months to preparation. He rehearsed rigorously, incorporating new material, revised arrangements, a full orchestra, a gospel choir, and a band composed of some of the nation's premier musicians. He was gripped by anxiety, having not performed live for 8 years. The intervening film years had kept him away from every significant stage. Now he was about to walk before 2,000 people in a venue deliberately filled by the hotel with celebrities, critics, and industry insiders, all positioned to scrutinize whether the comeback was authentic. He emerged wearing a black, karate-inspired jumpsuit designed for ease of movement. As he stepped onto the stage, the room erupted. It was not a polite or measured applause, but a spontaneous outpouring that occurs when an audience recognizes they are witnessing a moment destined for enduring remembrance. He performed for an hour and a half. His presence was mesmerizing. His banter between songs was humorous, and he self-deprecatingly referenced his films. But when he sang, truly sang, all else faded into insignificance. The following morning's reviews employed terms such as electrifying, astonishing, and the preeminent live performer in America. The Hollywood Reporter declared it the most thrilling live performance Las Vegas had ever witnessed. Every performance during the engagement sold out. Lines of attendees stretched around the building. The International set attendance records that had previously been unimaginable because the need for such records had never arisen. No one had previously drawn such vast throngs. Elvis returned home to Graceland between engagements and was content. He felt like his authentic self again, embodying the performer he had always aspired to be, rather than the movie star Parker had manufactured. He expressed to confidants that those initial months in Vegas were the happiest he had experienced in years. However, a crucial reality, which Elvis did not fully perceive at the time, was already in effect. The hotel adored him because he was a veritable money-printing machine. 2 performances nightly, every night, for 4 weeks, twice annually. This was the quantifiable basis of their relationship, and a machine that generates income is not granted time off to explore alternative avenues. It is not permitted to undertake risky artistic ventures. It is not permitted to travel to London, Tokyo, or Rome, even when the entire world is clamoring for its presence. A machine is maintained just sufficiently to ensure its continued operation, and then it is run until it breaks down. By 1970, the opulent confinement had been erected, though Elvis had not yet perceived the bars. The performances that ultimately broke him. Let us examine the mathematical toll this schedule imposed on a human physique. 2 performances per night, a midnight show and a 2 a.m. show. 4 weeks, 57 performances per engagement. 2 engagements annually. That amounts to 114 Las Vegas shows each year, not including the domestic touring that Parker meticulously scheduled into the remaining months. Elvis's performances were far from gentle. He poured his entire being into every show, every night, irrespective of his physical condition or personal circumstances. The jumpsuits grew increasingly elaborate as the years progressed, necessitated by the need to project his presence to the rear of venues accommodating 2,000 individuals. Every detail had to be magnified. He perspired profusely throughout each performance. He performed with a physicality honed by his martial arts training, yet still profoundly exhausting at the ages of 35, 37, and 40. Sleep became an impossibility. 2 nightly performances meant he rarely concluded before 3 or 3:30 in the morning. He could not sleep while the adrenaline still coursed through his system. Consequently, he would remain awake until 6 or 7 a.m., then sleep through the day until it was time to commence anew. His diurnal and nocturnal cycles were entirely inverted. His body never adapted, as there was never sufficient time for adaptation. By 1972, those in his immediate vicinity began to observe the changes. His vocal prowess remained exceptional. It never entirely abandoned him. Even in his final recordings from 1977, the instrument itself was still discernible when he could access it. However, the vocal range was diminishing. The control that had been effortless in 1969 now demanded considerable exertion. He was compensating in ways that discerning ears could detect. His stage energy also underwent a transformation. The early Vegas performances were dynamic, unpredictable, and genuinely exhilarating. By the mid-1970s, the performances had become ritualistic. The same songs, presented in a largely consistent order, the same interspersed jokes, the same movements. The audience still adored it, as most were witnessing Elvis for the first time, and he was undeniably still Elvis. However, those who observed night after night, the musicians, the backup singers, the hotel staff, could perceive the hardening of the template. Spontaneity was gradually being eroded. His friend and occasional confidant, Lamar Fike, articulated it plainly years later. The schedule was impossible. No one could sustain that and remain healthy, sane, or creative. Yet Parker continued to book engagements, the hotel continued to sign contracts, and Elvis continued to appear. Because here is a crucial aspect of Elvis that people often fail to grasp. He was not a confrontational individual. Despite his swaggering persona, his karate skills, his firearms, his entourage, and the mythology surrounding his kingship, Elvis Presley was fundamentally non-confrontational when it came to those closest to him. He would express his frustrations to his friends, but he never confronted Parker. He signed whatever Parker presented, and he performed wherever Parker directed him to be. This confluence of a controlling manager and a non-confrontational client is the very mechanism by which a career can be systematically dismantled in slow motion, one signed document at a time. What Vegas siphoned away. Las Vegas is not constructed for the well-being of human beings. It is engineered for the systematic extraction of wealth from them. It accomplishes this objective with remarkable efficacy by eliminating every natural indicator that would otherwise prompt one to cease. Casinos lack windows, and clocks are conspicuously absent from the walls. The lighting remains constant, whether it is 3 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning. The climate control prevents the body from registering discomfort. Every element is meticulously designed to retain patrons precisely where they are, engaged in precisely what they are doing, for precisely 1 moment longer than intended. Elvis Presley existed within this environment for months each year, over a span of 7 consecutive years. What Vegas inflicts upon visitors in 72 hours, it inflicted upon Elvis over nearly a decade. The entourage played a significant role and proved to be a detrimental factor. The Memphis Mafia, the group of friends and employees who constantly surrounded Elvis, served a genuine purpose in the early years. They were loyal, ensuring smooth operations and maintaining a buffer against external intrusions. However, within the confines of the Vegas bubble, their function evolved. They became enablers out of necessity, not out of malice, but because the sole means of remaining in Elvis's sphere of influence was to provide Elvis with what he desired. And what Elvis increasingly desired were the pills. His prescription drug use commenced during his army service, a period when many servicemen of his generation were first introduced to the amphetamines employed by military culture to maintain soldier alertness during extended missions. By the time Elvis arrived in Vegas, the intake of medication had become a structured component of his daily regimen. Stimulants to sustain him through performances, depressants to mitigate the post-adrenaline crash, sleeping pills to forcibly induce rest, and painkillers to address the accumulating physical damage inflicted by the grueling schedule. Dr. George Nicopolis, later known as Dr. Nick, prescribed an immense quantity of controlled substances to Elvis over the years. In the final 20 months of Elvis's life alone, Dr. Nicopolis prescribed over 10,000 doses of various drugs, including narcotics, sedatives, and amphetamines. The sheer magnitude of this figure is staggering when vocalized. However, what is often overlooked in the narrative of Elvis's drug use is this. The medications were a response to a schedule that no human body could endure without chemical assistance. They were not the affliction, they were the symptom. The true affliction was the contract. The affliction was Tom Parker scheduling 2 nightly performances for a man approaching middle age and euphemistically terming it management. Vegas also exacted a further toll. It contributed to the dissolution of Elvis's marriage. Priscilla Presley has been candid in the years following his death about the profound transformation Elvis underwent during the Vegas years. The isolation, the demanding schedule, the inversion of day and night, and the constant presence of women readily available in a way that Priscilla, residing at Graceland and raising their daughter Lisa Marie, could not be. They divorced in 1973. Elvis was devastated. The performances, however, continued. The Final Contract, 1976. Elvis Presley is 41 years old. A comparison of photographs of Elvis from that year with those from 1969 reveals a stark difference, indicative not merely of the passage of 7 years, but of something far more profound. A physical deterioration that transcends normal aging, a testament to a body subjected to sustained and extraordinary duress. He had gained considerable weight, which the tabloids relentlessly ridiculed. However, this weight gain was partly a medical consequence of prescription drug use, disrupted sleep patterns, and the cortisol dysregulation resulting from chronic stress and persistent sleep deprivation. His facial features were puffy, and his hands occasionally trembled. There were nights on stage when he forgot lyrics, slurred his words, and appeared genuinely unwell to audiences who had paid to witness the King. The critical reception began to shift. While not universally negative, some critics who had initially lauded the early performances with profound admiration now penned reviews tinged with concern beneath their critiques. Rolling Stone published articles. Publications that had previously disregarded country music and Las Vegas for years suddenly turned their attention to Elvis, observing him with the same morbid fascination one affords a preventable traffic accident. And in 1976, Tom Parker negotiated a contract extension with the Hilton, perpetuating the same grueling routine. Colonel Parker had his own motivations for maintaining the operation, regardless of the cost to the asset itself. By the mid-1970s, Parker had developed a significant gambling addiction. He was reportedly losing millions of dollars annually at the Hilton's casino tables. The Hilton held this debt, and their method of recouping these losses was to keep Elvis under contract, thereby providing Parker with a personal financial incentive to ensure Elvis continued performing, irrespective of Elvis's physical state. The hotel was fully cognizant of Elvis's appearance on stage in 1976. They had observant personnel. They had 2,000 patrons nightly witnessing the performances. They were aware of his declining condition. Nevertheless, they renewed the contract because even a diminished Elvis Presley continued to sell out every single show. The venues were filled and the revenue flowed in. The fate of the individual within the jumpsuit was not their concern. During this period, Elvis confided in members of his inner circle that he felt ensnared, that he wished to cease performing, and that he was experiencing a profound and indescribable weariness. Those present recall him speaking of the contract with the resignation of a prisoner, discussing a sentence, something to be endured until its completion, something over which he possessed no agency. He was mistaken about his lack of power. He had legal counsel. He could have initiated a dispute, but that would have necessitated confronting Parker. Even in his final days, Elvis Presley did not confront Tom Parker. What truly precipitated Elvis's demise? On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was discovered unresponsive on the bathroom floor of Graceland. He was 42 years old. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, a cessation of heart function. The tabloids attributed his death to drugs, excessive eating, weight gain, and general indulgence. While not entirely inaccurate in these assertions, they were mistaken about the root cause. The cause was the contract. Consider the potential trajectory of Elvis Presley's career had Tom Parker adopted a different managerial approach in 1969. Imagine if, instead of confining Elvis to a hotel for a staggering 7 years, Colonel Tom Parker had leveraged the immense energy from the comeback special and directed it outward to the global stage. A worldwide tour. Picture London, a city where the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had already demonstrated the power to fill vast stadiums. Envision Tokyo, a nation where reverence for Elvis had been a prominent cultural force since the 1950s. Then consider Sydney, Paris, and Rio de Janeiro. The entire planet had been anticipating Elvis Presley's arrival for 2 decades. Yet, he never graced those international stages because one man, lacking the necessary travel documents, was unable to accompany him abroad. Significant cinematic endeavors also presented missed opportunities. Renowned director John Huston remained consistently intrigued by the prospect of working with Elvis. A potential starring role alongside Barbra Streisand in A Star Is Born, slated for 1976, would have undoubtedly become a significant cultural moment. Streisand herself actively desired Elvis for the part, with her representatives making direct contact with Parker. However, Parker rejected the offer, citing the inflexible Las Vegas performance schedule that left no room for such a commitment. Streisand ultimately proceeded with the film, casting Chris Christopherson in the role, and it went on to achieve tremendous success. Elvis reportedly saw the film and confided in friends that he believed he should have been the one in that role. In terms of musical output, albums of consequence were largely overlooked. During the 1970s, artists such as Marvin Gaye, David Bowie, and Bruce Springsteen were producing groundbreaking records that redefined the boundaries of popular music. Elvis possessed the vocal prowess, the tonal range, and the inherent musical intellect to be a central figure in this artistic dialogue. Instead, Parker continued to supply him with a steady stream of soundtrack albums and budget label releases, driven by their ease of production and their ability to generate rapid income without demanding significant creative contemplation from anyone involved. Elvis could have forged a lasting legacy comparable to Frank Sinatra, who masterfully reinvented himself in the 1950s and maintained his relevance as a dynamic artist well into his 70s. Instead, his career became characterized by a restrictive hotel residency agreement and a manager who systematically siphoned off 50% of his earnings. The cardiac arrhythmia that ultimately claimed the life of Elvis Presley on August 16, 1977, represented the final consequence of a decade marked by the severe physical toll exacted by the demands of his Las Vegas contract. His heart ceased to function because it had been subjected to an excessive burden for an extended period. Upon learning of Elvis's passing, Tom Parker's initial reported reaction was to inquire whether the death would impact the scheduled upcoming performances. What became of them all? Following Elvis's demise, Tom Parker wasted no time. He promptly moved to solidify his control over the estate's assets. Numerous deals were already in progress, including merchandise agreements and licensing arrangements. The intricate apparatus that managed Elvis Presley as a commercial entity had been operational for decades, and Parker fully intended to maintain its momentum, with himself remaining at its core. Priscilla Presley, acting as the estate's executor alongside Elvis's father, Vernon, eventually initiated a legal review of Parker's management contract with the estate. This examination confirmed what many within the industry had long suspected. Parker's 50% commission arrangement constituted a clear conflict of interest, and he had demonstrably failed to fulfill his fiduciary responsibilities to Elvis. In 1983, Parker was officially removed from any position of authority or involvement with the Elvis Presley estate. He received a settlement and subsequently departed. He relocated to Las Vegas, a predictable move, and resided there until his death in 1997. His penchant for gambling persisted until his final days. He never granted a significant interview to discuss his role in Elvis's decline. He passed away at the age of 87 in his sleep. The Hilton Hotel continued to feature Elvis tribute artists in its performance venues for many years. The very establishment that seemed to have contributed to Elvis's downfall persisted in capitalizing on his image long after he was gone. If this scenario does not encapsulate the unvarnished reality of Las Vegas, then it is difficult to conceive of what does. Priscilla Presley transformed Graceland into the renowned destination it is today, attracting over 600,000 visitors annually, making it one of America's most frequently visited private residences. She championed the estate when its value was negligible and meticulously cultivated it into a significant cultural landmark. The woman who had been kept at a distance during the Las Vegas years ultimately became the steadfast protector of everything those years had sought to consume. Lisa Marie Presley navigated her life under the immense weight of her father's legendary status, experiencing a life that mirrored the inherited instability inherent in Graceland's complex legacy. The pressures, the wealth, and the pervasive mythology all contributed. She passed away in January of 2023 at the age of 54, the same age her father had been approaching, burdened by the same formidable legacy. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, never truly recovered from his son's death. He died in 1979, less than 2 years after Elvis. The International Hotel, later rebranded as the Las Vegas Hilton, then the LVH, and currently known as the Westgate Las Vegas, still stands prominently on Paradise Road. A visit to its lobby today immerses one in the presence of Elvis. His photographs adorn the walls, and his name is immortalized on commemorative plaques. The very showroom where he delivered his iconic performances bears his name. Within the property, a museum houses his distinctive jumpsuits, displayed within protective glass cases. They have erected a monument to the man they played a significant role in diminishing, and they charge an admission fee to view it. This, then, is the chronicle of Elvis Presley and the contractual confines that imprisoned him. A man who was once the most electrifying performer alive, reduced by inept management and corporate calculations to a mere automaton, fueled by prescription medications and unwavering obligation, performing himself to the brink of death in a desert hotel, while the world he was destined to conquer awaited his arrival. He never came, not due to any inability on his part, but because one man, lacking the necessary passport, simply would not permit him to depart. Benny Binion built a casino upon a foundation of trust, only for his own kin to dismantle it from within. Frank Rosenthal constructed a sports empire on a stolen bedrock. And Tom Parker took the most prodigious natural talent in the history of American music and transformed him into a performer offering 2 shows nightly, possessing a projected shelf life of 25 years, bound by a contract that allocated as much remuneration to the manager as it did to the king. In Las Vegas, the house invariably triumphs. This is the paramount and ultimate lesson. However, occasionally, the house does not prevail through superior intellect. It wins by virtue of its control. It constructed the establishment, bolted the doors, and the individual trapped within never fully grasped that the gilded cage and the actual one appear identical from the inside. Such was the narrative of Elvis Presley, and such was the essence of Las Vegas. Which aspect of this story surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and if you find joy in uncovering the true stories behind the dazzling lights, please subscribe, as every legend possesses a unique narrative, and Vegas never forgets.